there we go. And hand over to MiMi. So it's absolutely lovely to have you with us this morning. Thank you so much. I've certainly got lots to learn. So shall we get started? So, I mean, what would be a really good place to start perhaps is if you could possibly start by telling us a little bit more about Burmese food in general, because it's certainly new to me.
I will do. So I'll work on the assumption that most of you aren't familiar with Burmese food. So I always start off these things with a big disclaimer. So Burma, and I'm going to call it Burma just because that's what I'm used to rather than Myanmar, is a huge country, and it's made up of over 135 ethnic groups. And I think each of those groups have their own fairly distinct cuisines. So my caveat that I always give is that my cooking, the cooking that I do, the cooking that's covered in my book, is from two main ethnic groups. So those are the ones that are my heritage, basically. So it kind of part Burman being the dominant ethnic group. I think at last count it was something like 70% of the country. And the second most dominant group, which is Shan. And Shan people are like mountain people. There's a lot of them in Thailand as well. So if you've ever been to Chiang Mai is full of a lot of Shan people, although if they're there, they may well refer to themselves as Dai instead. So that is kind of my background, and this is the kind of cooking that I do. So in terms of what the food is like, Burmese food is a bit of a magpie. It likes to cherry pick ingredients and influences from the neighbouring countries. So we have our neighbours of India and China and Bangladesh and Thailand. And so people that go there, they always say to me, so, you know, is it a noodle country? And I say, well, yeah, we like our noodles, and they're probably most similar to noodles from Yunnan, which is kind of the state in China that borders us. But then I say, but we really like fried things. So, you know, there's fritters at every meal. We will have some form of crunch because we love texture. And then I have to say, but also we used to be known as the rice bowl of Asia, and we love rice. And so actually, even though we love noodles, rice is something that we have to have every day. In fact, there is a saying that says that if you don't have rice, you feel like you haven't eaten for the day. And in common with a lot of other countries in Asia, we say that instead of saying, how are you? We say, have you eaten any rice yet? So we like our rice, we like our noodles, we like our fritters. We also like our salads. So in that respect, we're quite similar to Thailand and also Laos Republic. So we have, basically, if you can chop it up, you can mix it with a dressing and you can eat it. So it's a bit of everything. It's a real mixed bag, but it does mean that whatever you're into, you will find something that clicks with you. And the thing about Shan cuisine, or the thing about this specific thing that I'm going to make, the tofu, is that it's something that encompasses all of those things, because as I said, I'm going to do 3 dishes for you today, and the 3 dishes are going to be a noodle dish, and a salad, and some fritters. So you're using the same kind of core ingredient to showcase all the different types of dishes that we like. So I think that's probably it in a nutshell. You kind of, there's lots and lots of different things to expect, and we really like texture. The other thing, I guess, if you really want to compare it with another cuisine, I guess I think it's quite similar to Malaysian food in that you have the whole mix of different flavors. And we also like our breads, but the thing about our breads is they're all stolen. And I'm saying that quite brazenly because I don't think there are any particular breads that we've made ourselves. They're all nicked from like Malaysia or India. So we even use the words that so we call it puri and prata, and so we, you know, no shame in stealing all the breads, but we like breads too. But in terms of kind of the indigenous cuisine, I think it's mainly rice with a bit of noodles on the side. So.
That sounds amazing. And so let's talk a little bit about Burmese tofu then. So how is it different from what most people understand?
So I think it said in the description of this workshop that basically I never really knew what tofu was when I was growing up, because I had a childhood where my mum basically only ever cooked Burmese food. I had school dinners, but obviously you're not going to get, you know, your standard soybean tofu at school. So I only really ate Burmese food at home, and so when I started to hear about, I had some friends who were vegetarian and they were saying that, or their families are vegetarian, and they said that, oh, my mum makes this tofu and it's just really bland, and they described that it was white, and I was just completely perplexed by this whole thing because I didn't have that kind of cultural knowledge that tofu was not Burmese tofu. So Burmese tofu, okay, need to take a step back. So shan tofu is kind of where it all began. So shan tofu is made from something called zador, and zador is sort of like yellow split peas, not exactly the same, but it's probably the closest analog. And this pea is basically it is ground using millstones, using machinery, and then it's kind of mixed basically with water and rested and seasoning, and then it's kind of turned into, I guess, sort of like polenta. You basically cook it up and then it becomes like this huge gelatinous slab, right? Now, shan tofu is kind of used in all the same ways I'm about to show you, but there's a big difference between shan tofu and Burmese tofu. So shan tofu, because you're using yellow split peas, because yellow split pea flour isn't commercially available either in Burma or I believe here, it is quite a labor intensive process because you are having to use kind of, you know, you have a store that specializes in producing this shan tofu, or you have kind of people like markets that, you know, have their grindstones that they are doing it and that's all they do. But in terms of Burmese tofu, I think it was decided that it was a bit too labor intensive. And so we kind of cheated in the way that a lot of Burmese food is kind of trying to make the best of what you have and trying to make life easier for yourself. And so although shan tofu is done with yellow split peas, Burmese tofu is done with chickpea flour. So it's also called bazan, but basically this stuff, you don't need a bag this big, but I usually have on this big, but it's gram flour. Now, gram flour, if you if you cook Indian food, you're probably quite familiar with it already. It used to be that you could only get it in South Asian stores, but it's pretty well available now. I mean, I got this from Morrison's. This is a 3 kilo bag I got from Morrison's. And you can get it from Dove's Farm. I think it's quite popular as a health food, or at least if you're celiac, of course, because it's gluten free. So it's one of those kind of flours that is also used in baking quite a lot now, although I've never used it in baking because to me this is something that is used for tofu and nothing else. But gram flour basically meant that we could shortcut the original process of kind of grinding your own yellow split peas, and you could just get some flour, get some water, add some seasoning, and, you know, Bob's your uncle. The other change that we did, the other big change we did, is that if you ever see shan tofu, it's very pale, because yellow split peas, when they've been cooked down in that way, it's kind of quite similar, and I have a feeling it probably is a cousin, if not related to. There's a Chinese kind of mung bean. I guess it is a sort of tofu as well, called lang fen. Now, I'm probably pronouncing that completely wrongly, but basically it is made from mung bean flour. I think you have similar things in Korean food as well, but it's kind of it's kind of mung bean flour that's being cooked up in the same way, causing the same jelly. And so the shan stuff is very similar visually to that stuff. So it's very pale, sometimes it's a bit translucent. But because Burmese tofu uses the gram flour, it's kind of a bit warmer looking. But the other thing that we do, which is a very Burman thing to do, is we add turmeric to it. And so what you get is a kind of a sunshiny yellow, which means that, you know, you're getting basically the same dishes that the shan people cook, but it's just that much warmer looking. So I'll show you what a slab looks like, because I've had to do this a bit like Blue Peter. Here's one I made earlier. I don't know if you can see that, but it's very, very yellow. And that's just because of the tofu. Is that way over exposed? Can you see that?
I can see it.
Okay. Cool.
MiMi, can I just ask you to spell those different types of tofu you talked about? Because I can put it in the chat in case people want to look them up. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Sorry. So you want to talk about the different types we have?
That would be great. If I could just make a note of them in the chat, so then people can always look them up afterwards. So you're talking about the shan tofu?
Shan tofu is kind of like the daddy. That's the original one.
And how do we spell that, please?
The shan is S-H-A-N. So like I said, I'm quarter shan.
Yeah.
And then what Burmese tofu is kind of like a cheats version, kind of like a pan sunny notes version. But that's the version that's kind of eaten more universally around country.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you.
And then if people do want to look it up, the kind of Chinese cousin is called Liang Fen, which is Liangfen. And that's very similar, but made with mung beans.
Thank you very much. So I put those in the chat so people can follow up on that. That's amazing. So your dishes you're going to show us, all three are going to use the tofu you have in front of you.
Yes.
Fantastic. And are the recipes in your book?
So the salads in my book, the fritters in my book, the molten tofu, the noodle dishes is kind of referred to, but it's not actually properly in my book. So you're getting a sort of an exclusive here.
That's amazing. Okay, so are you going to maybe you could talk us a little bit about how you make the tofu? Would that be?
I will. So I remember to do my mise en place. I was actually quite
well done.
So as I said, I've shown you the versions that have been made already because those are the versions that I'm going to be cooking with. But I'll show you from the start how to make the tofu. So you've got your ground flour. You don't need your 3 kilo sack. What you need actually, and this is surprisingly modest, is I've got 100 grams of ground flour in there. You don't have to sift it. Some people do, but I'm incredibly lazy, and that's the other thing about Burmese food. A lot of it is very kind of labour unintensive, which I love. So you've got the ground flour in there.
Interesting, because it can often look quite lumpy, I find, when I use it, but it does become quite smooth.
I think it's probably the whisking, the whisking technique which I do, which always seems to work out okay. Maybe I've just been lucky. So actually, don't take my word for it. You don't have to sift it, but I've literally never sifted it.
Special type of ground flour you need to buy as such, is there? I mean, I buy one that's sold by an Indian retailer at Asda, but is there much difference in terms of how they perform?
I haven't found so far. The one time I did find a difference was because usually it is just chickpeas, but one time I found one which was a mix of chickpeas and yellow split peas, and that I had to change the times very slightly because I think yellow split peas are a little bit more fragile. And so for that, I think I reduced the quantity of water that I had to put in because brown flour, chickpeas are really robust, but yellow split peas less so, I think.
Interesting.
So yes, and I think generally if you buy a pack of ground flour in any supermarket, it will say chickpeas in the ingredients, but very occasionally it will say chickpeas and yellow split peas. So that's something to keep an eye on, I guess. But that's only happened to me once in however many decades of making chickpea tofu.
Good to know.
Okay, so we've got your ground flour unsifted, and we have got, this is a relatively easy recipe to remember in terms of quantity. So you've got 100 grams ground flour, you have got a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, we have got a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. Now, not everyone uses the baking powder. This is something that kind of my mom taught me just because it makes the tofu a bit more stable if you're going to do lots of different things with it. It also means that it can keep a little bit longer because generally once you've made the tofu, if you're not using the baking powder, it's not going to last very long and you have to use it as soon as it's set. But if you use that baking powder, you can keep it till the next day, basically. And then, starting with some controversy straight away, this is a 1/4 teaspoon of MSG. Not going to have a debate about this right now. What I will do is I'm happy to do a completely different workshop just about MSG. But basically, we like monosodium glutamate in Burma. It's used pretty much in most of our dishes. It's also used in Thailand. It's used in La Republic. A lot of countries in Southeast Asia are big fans. I'm just going to leave it at that. If you don't want to use that, you always very free, instead of using the salt and the MSG, you can swap it with a teaspoon of stock powder, so like marigold bouillon, that kind of thing. That's quite a good substitute. And then the last thing is the turmeric. So again, a 1/4 teaspoon. So you've got 1/4 teaspoon, 1/4 teaspoon, 1/4 teaspoon, 1/4 teaspoon. And the turmeric is what gives it the lovely golden colour.
Is it always dried turmeric?
Ground turmeric, yeah. We don't tend to use fresh turmeric. I guess we have that in common with India in that most of our spices tend to be ground. We don't use fresh that much, apart from the one very obvious thing that we use is we don't tend to use ground coriander. We tend to use coriander stems instead. So you'll see in the book, a lot of my recipes say, get a bunch of coriander, chop off the leaf, reserve the stems and grind the stems because the stems are just incredibly fresh and green tasting. So my beef curry, and then that one of the main ingredients is coriander stems. And we prefer that to, say, coriander roots, which is obviously what Thailand likes to use. So we've got our brown flour, we've got the little seasonings, and then what we need to do now is, I'm going to get up. I'm going to put in, this is 350 grams of cold water, mils of cold water. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour a little bit in, and I guess this is why it isn't lumpy. I pour a tiny bit in, and then basically I'm drizzling it so that it mixes. Because if you whack it all in, you are definitely going to end in lumps. So hang on. So basically you put in enough water just to loosen. And so you start off with what looks like, I guess, kind of a paste. Can you see that? Oh, I've just, and then when it gets solid again, you add more water. So basically you add a little bit at a time. I guess, see, I don't bake. So what I was about to say is this is like making dough, but I don't actually know how to make dough. So basically you add enough so that you keep mopping up the dry ingredients. And so it becomes moist, but without wet. Because as soon as it's kind of running, that's when you're done for, because that's when the lumps start coming in.
Is that just a little whisk you're using there?
Yeah, this is one of these. I don't know if you've ever seen this. This is from Lakeland, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not very good with big whisks. I've got small hands. So I like to use these tiny whisks for everything.
And is that the best way to do it sort of manually with a whisk rather than putting it in a machine?
Oh gosh, yes. No, I don't have any machine. I'm very old school. I don't even like using food processors. I use the pestle and mortar for most things.
Nice.
The only time I use it kind of grudgingly is if I'm doing a supper club. And then I realise it's just it's not going to be possible to do everything manually. But otherwise, yes, I'm a big fan. One time I did this thing I don't know if you know Matt Follis. He is based in Dorset. He's a chef. Got a new restaurant opening. He won MasterChef a million years ago. But basically, I did like a night at his about a decade ago. And he gave me like the prep kitchen to use because obviously he was using his real kitchen for the restaurant. And so I was sorting that out the night before the day I was meant to be doing the service. And he came upstairs and he saw that I'd kind of manually chopped about 80 onions. And he said to me, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't like using food processors." So I've got over that since then. Like I said, that was a decade ago, but yeah, not wise. I once won a KitchenAid in a cookery competition and I've never used it. And I feel bad because obviously people love KitchenAids. I should do something with it, really.
They are useful, but I mean, I use mine mainly for bread making and large quantities of meringues and the things that it's just a pain to do by hand, but otherwise you can live without it.
I don't know. I think possibly I'm just a masochist. So I don't feel like I've done it properly unless I'm in pain.
So what's the texture looking like in that? It's quite bright.
So it's kind of,
see,
it's gone pretty runny now. So I've just been adding a little bit at a time, and now it's smooth. Now I'm now going to add all of it because it's completely smooth. And what you'll see is that
like a sort of
ridiculous because it literally is just incredibly runny. Can you see the bubbles of water?
So sort of like a milk.
The thing about this now is that I guess like this is again me trying to find references that I might possibly be able to make sense. So I guess it's a bit like Yorkshire pudding batter in that you have to let it sit for a bit.
Right.
Now in my book it says you have to let it sit for 2 hours, but see I wrote this 2 years ago, and then since then I found out sort of accidentally because I had some friends coming around and thought, oh, I'll make tofu, and then I realized I didn't have 2 hours spare, so I thought I'd wing it, and I made it anyway, and I only rested it for an hour and it was fine. So if you do make it, you do only have to rest it for an hour. The 2 hour thing was basically because my mother taught me how to make it, and you know, if someone says yes, you have to rest it for 2 hours, you're not actually going to start experimenting unless you need to. So yes, you don't need to rest for 2 hours. So it's just kind of like this very, very runny batter now. And so what you do is you put it to one side and you cover it loosely. So I usually use just like a saucepan lid or something, and then probably once every 20 minutes, 15 minutes, I just give it a quick stir because it tends to settle otherwise. So we've got that there. Now, we've got a pan, which, not pan, a bowl of one that I'd already done. I don't know if you can tell, but this one's a lot more yellow looking because it's been sitting for a while.
Interesting.
I guess the turmeric kind of infuses through properly at that point. And you'll see it's also thickened up a tiny bit. It's not half as runny as it was an hour ago when I first mixed it up. So that is what I'm going to use to show you how to make the tofu proper. Charlotte, remind me, did I say I was going to show you how to make the soft tofu next, or actually how to cook the tofu?
So how to cook the tofu and then move on to the noodles. Does that sound like a plan?
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So I'm just gonna put on my machine. Right. So I've got a saucepan there, and in the saucepan I've got something like a tablespoon of just neutral oil. I use groundnut oil, but sunflower oil, anything's fine. And then there's also 250 mils of water in there again. I think it's a bit like, someone was telling me, and like I said, I don't know this for sure, but someone was telling me it's a bit similar to how farinata is made, in that you have the water there and the oil there already, and then you add the solution to it. Now, this might be completely wrong, but this is just something someone told me. But the point is that you need to put this on the hob and have it on high, and what happens is you need to get it so it's actually boiling. Hopefully this will be quite quick because this cooker is pretty efficient. And then when this is bubbling away, that's when you pour in your batter. And you won't be able to see that obviously, but I'll talk you through it. But when you pour in the batter, you need to be quite careful not to let it go in as one lump. You have to swirl it in, because the idea is that the hot water immediately makes the batter. Is coagulate the right word? Is that basically it should thicken almost immediately, and that's what you want it to happen.
Okay.
Coagulate is quite an unpleasant word, I know that.
No, is coagulate the separation? I can't remember.
Sorry?
I need to look it up. I'm having a mind block. I know what you mean exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, this pan has got 250 mils of water, and it has got a tablespoon of neutral oil. And I'm just going to get it so that it's bubbling away. And then as soon as this bubbles away, I'm going to pour in the batter that I've left to rest for an hour already. And then what happens is that you need to work quite quickly, because, like I said, what should happen, theoretically, it doesn't always happen, but I'll also tell you how to rescue it if it doesn't happen. But what should happen is that when you stir it, it should start to thicken up very quickly, and then you have to work to make sure that the bottom doesn't stick, because the thing is, if you let it stick, what happens is that it will start to cook too much. Because, and again, I don't know whether this is something to do with the chemistry of chickpeas generally, because I know, there's that stuff that you can use, is it aquafaba, the chickpea water? So people have been, learning all sorts of new ways to use that. So using them like egg whites, basically. So I think the thing about the chickpea flour is that if you don't cook it quickly, if you let it sit, it turns into a soup, which is fine if you're making the noodles. So I've done that for the noodles. But if you're making the tofu, that's what you absolutely want to avoid, because what happens is it cooks through and it's delicious, but it won't set anymore. So this is I guess the balancing act is you've got to work quickly. So we're getting there. I should have had this on earlier. So as I said, the whole thing about making the tofu is that it's kind of one of the Burmese philosophies in life, is that you might have only a handful of ingredients, but you try to make the most of them. I was speaking to, a while ago, I was on the food program, and they asked me to come on and talk about garlic. And garlic is kind of similar in that it's very popular, and we kind of try and find all sorts of different ways that we can use it. So there is a particular dish where we have the garlic, which is used raw, and we use it as a crispy, like crispy fried garlic, and we use it as an oil, and we use it as kind of a salsa. So it's something where, you will use it in a way that you're not necessarily, you're showcasing the actual ingredient, but you're using different aspects of it to make different new and interesting dishes, basically. This is getting there.
That's good. So Sally has confirmed that coagulation means to clot or curdle, change from a fluid to a solid state. So there we go. Thank you, Sally Jane. Fantastic.
I love this spot checking, it's great.
I know.
Thank you.
So we can see that that's getting
It is. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
But you want it kind of basically angry. You want it ferociously bubbling, because what will happen obviously is that as soon as you introduce the cold batter, it's going to cool down. Just making sure that I have I do have a spatula. So this is a non-stick pan, by the way. You can use a normal pan, but it's going to make your life a lot more difficult. And a wooden spoon.
Great.
See, it's a non-stick pan. I don't want to damage it.
Yes. And those the flat bottoms are quite good for getting in all the corners, aren't they?
Yeah. So spatula more than a spoon, I guess, because you want to be able to scrape.
Mm-hmm. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the texture of this tofu when it's cooked. So I'm looking at the stuff you've made on the board.
So it's not quite like jelly, it's a lot firmer.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I said it's gelatinous, it's kind of, I don't really know what to describe or what to say it's similar to. Let me just do this and I'll see that we're actually doing the thing. Okay, this is angry enough now.
Okay.
Right, so I'm pouring this in and I'm trying to swirl it in. And I don't know if you can hear, but like it stopped being angry straight away, because obviously this is cold liquid into hot liquid, so we poured it down. Now I'm going to let it sit just a little bit, and then I'm going to start stirring it. It's a little bit like making scrambled eggs, I suppose. Okay, so it's starting to bubble again. You can hear the kind of noises. Right, yes, no, it starts to thicken immediately. So what I'm doing now is not fast, it's a nice smooth stir. Because basically any part of the batter that's in contact with the base of the pan starts to thicken immediately. And so what you want is even cooking all the way around. I'm going to turn down the heat a little bit, but not much. So it's now on like a medium high. I guess it was on high.
You can see you're having to work a bit harder there.
So it's kind of thickened to the amount that I want. So it's now like, it is now basically like polenta or a very, very thick custard. And what you want is that you want it to do that thing where when it bubbles, you see kind of little craters form, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So that is happening now already. And so I should have told you this already. So what I've done is I prepared like a thing, a carton. So you can use a Tupperware. I've actually used a takeaway carton. But basically what I've done is I've just kind of greased this very lightly. I have those horrible oil spray things, so that's what I've used to grease that. So I'll just show you what this looks like. Again, I hope you can see.
Oh wow.
So that's kind of, woo.
It is like a really thick custard, isn't it? Especially with the yellow colour.
And then the idea is, you won't really be able to see this, unfortunately, but basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to dollop this into this prepared takeaway container. And if it's the consistency that it should come out in ribbons, like really wide ribbons. Now, I was saying to you earlier that you can rescue it if it's gone wrong. What normally happens is that it's too runny, and that's just depending on how good your cooker is at maintaining that heat. Or getting things hot very quickly. So what I do then is I would just get some extra gram flour and just sprinkle it on. So it's a bit like thickening any sauce, I suppose. So you just sprinkle some gram flour on and then continue whisking, and that should help it thicken up. So you see that pan is very fat. Don't try and wash that. Let it cool down, and then you should be able to just peel away the bits, basically.
Just got to cool, isn't it?
thing you do is that when it's been poured into the container, bash it on the table. It means that you're getting rid of air bubbles if there are any. So it's not very attractive.
Wow.
Basically,
That's amazing.
Can you? I don't know if you can actually see the ribbon formation because it's come out in those kind of fat ribbons, basically. So, and if you want to, you can smooth over the surface, but I rarely bother. Mm-hmm. So what you do now is that you need to leave it to cool down at room temperature. I usually leave it for about an hour. And then when it's cooled down completely, then you put it in the fridge. If you try and put it in the fridge too soon, it will crack. And that's, again, something you completely don't want to do. So let it cool down. Don't lid it. I usually put, like, I have one of those funny fruit basket fly cover type things. So I just usually put that kind of mesh cover over it to let it cool down unmolested. So that's what I'll do with that. So I'm just going to move this into the kitchen and I'll be back.
Great. Fantastic. Well, the first thing that strikes me about that is that apart from the MSG, I've got everything in the cupboard to make it, which I wasn't necessarily expecting. Have we missed? I'm just having a look at any questions. Oh, MSG, yeah. So for anyone who's joined late, we're going to try and do some questions at the end, and Sam Bilton has got some book news at the end. So you're back. Hello.
Hello. So, as I said, that is just kind of waiting to cool down, and then as soon as it's cooled down, what you do is sometimes some liquid will come out, like it will seep out. So what you want to do is you want to pour away that liquid when it's completely cool. What I tend to do is I put my hand on it and turn it like that. Clean hand, obviously. And then while it's like that, I will take it out of the tub while it's still on my hand, and I'll get some kitchen paper and put that on the base, and then you kind of wrap that around slightly, and then you put it back into the same container. So what happens is that you end up with a container that's lined with kitchen paper that's still got the tofu in it. And the reason you do that is, depending on how long it's going to be until you next use it, that liquid will continue to kind of sweat out, basically. I'm coming out with all the delicious terms. I was like, coagulate, sweat. But basically, you want to keep it in as a firmer state as possible, and so that excess liquid will make it crack. Putting it in the fridge while it's still warm will make it crack, and the whole point about this is making life easy. So you don't want to get to a situation where you've made your tofu and then you're going to start serving it to your friends, and then you realise that it's gone horribly wrong, and then you weep. Not that that's ever happened to me.
No, but I should think the dryness helps to keep it nice and firm, and it'll cook a lot better. Mm-hmm.
It does.
Fantastic.
Okay, what's next?
Fantastic. So shall we have a think about the, forgive my pronunciation, is it Tohu Nway?
Tohu Nway. So Tohu Nway is kind of how it's become most well known around the country. It literally means warm tofu. Now, the thing about Tohu Nway is that it's not actually a term that I personally use or anyone in Upper Burma uses. So my family, as I said, I'm part Shan. My mum is from Mugo, which is just outside the Shan state, again in the hills. And my dad is from Mandalay. And so that counts as Upper Burma. And in Upper Burma, we refer to it as Tohu Kyaw. Now, Tohu Kyaw means molten tofu, which is much more descriptive and actually a nicer name as far as I'm concerned. So what this is basically, when I was kind of panicking, going, oh, stir. If you want Tohu Kyaw, you turn it right down to medium. You don't have it on high. And what happens is that it just turns into a kind of porridge. So it doesn't set. It's just kind of like this nice. See, what's happened here is because I made this earlier, it does look like lumpy custard. But the idea is that because it's on a medium heat, it won't ever set. So it won't ever get firm enough that you'll be able to make the tofu, but it remains molten. So this is the molten tofu. Now, the molten tofu, as I said, is a bit like a savoury porridge. And this is probably more popular in Upper Burma than Lower Burma. So Lower Burma is very keen on fried tofu. And so Lower Burma, things like Rangoon, Yangon. And they're very keen on the salad, Tohu Thoke, but they're not so keen on this because this is kind of considered a more rustic dish because it's a porridge. So I'm just trying to warm this up a little bit. So the way they eat it is they either eat it as is, so very, very kind of stripped back. So you just put it in a bowl, and then you might add some very small seasoning. So a little bit of oil, a little bit of vinegar or lime, because we like a little bit of a kick, and some crushed peanuts or sesame seeds. But a way that is also really popular, because like I said, this was originally a Shan dish, is over noodles, so Shan style noodles. And so what you do then is you get rice noodles, so flat white rice noodles, and then you put those in a bowl, and then you kind of pour this stuff on top, and then you put on the dressing and the garnishes. So it's a really nice, I find it a really nice dish. I think it can be a little bit challenging to some people because it's not super such. You've got your noodles and then you've got this porridge basically on top, and then you've got the crunchy garnish. So I think some people do actually just prefer the porridge without the noodles underneath. But I'm a big fan of the noodles. So this is warming up a little bit more.
MiMi, sorry, how do you spell the Tohu Kyaw you were talking about?
Byawt. So it's B-Y-A-W-T.
Thank you very much. I'm just putting that on the chat as well. Thank you.
Yes.
I can see everyone sort of taking notes as we go. I certainly am.
Okay, so this is now warming and smoothing up because, like I said, because I'd left it to sit for a bit, it had got a little bit lumpy custard. So I don't know if you can see. So it kind of looks like the mid stage of making the proper tofu. See that? Mm. And it's not going to get any firmer than that because it's on a medium heat. And I'm constantly stirring. But even if I wasn't stirring, because it's on a medium heat, it's never going to get to the state where it's having that chemical reaction where it goes completely solid.
So is that a sort of like a loose dropping consistency? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's porridge basically. That's warm enough now. So, as I mentioned, this is normally had with noodles. So, it's making this terrible farty noises now. Let's turn this down. So this is now the consistency that I want, which is, like I said, it's like a loose porridge. And then these are the noodles that I was talking about earlier. So these are like basically flat rice noodles. I think if you buy them in the shops, probably thin ho fun is what you're looking for, because ho fun's usually quite wide. But if you go to a Vietnamese store, it's basically the same stuff that you use for pho. It's the thin noodle, the thin flat noodle. Now, this isn't, just so you know, obviously this is cold because it's been sitting on the table, but normally they would be warm. And the way we warm noodles is the way that most people in Asia do, which is you kind of put it into like a colander and pour hot water over it, or you dunk it briefly. So this would normally be warm. And then we've got the warm molten noodles. And then what I'm going to do is switch this off completely. Get a ladle. I'll be back. So yeah, this is definitely the consistency you want now. So
great.
Custard.
Great.
So now I'm going to get this, and then what you do is you pour it. So some people like to drown it. I like to have it as kind of just like a topping. So it's more like a sauce. And then when that's done, you need to add your various it's kind of dressed, I suppose. So one of the most important things in Burmese cookery is a concept that I'm not entirely sure that other people have necessarily, but it's called sijet. And basically what this is, it literally means cooked oil. And all it is basically oil that you've used to fry onions, to fry garlic, to fry anything, basically. So it's the oil after it's been used for cooking. So that's why it's called sijet. But we use it as an ingredient. So what you do is you put like a very small, like I guess a tablespoon of that. And then you put sesame oil. And then dark soy sauce. And then garlic oil, which you can make your own or you can get from the supermarket now, which is quite exciting. And then crushed peanuts. We're very, very keen on peanuts. So I don't know if you can see that. So at the moment, that's got all the dressing on it. And now I'm going to put like the garnishes on it. So that's got crushed peanuts on it now. And toasted sesame seeds, which is now not weirdly stuck to my plate. Oh, there you go. It's went in one go. And then chopped spring onions. So this is kind of the classic way to eat molten tofu noodles. And so tongue twister, molten tofu noodles. So you've got the noodles, you've got the warm tofu, you've got the dressing, which is the various oils and the soy sauce. Oh, vinegar. I forgot, you do need to put vinegar in as well. Because as I said earlier, we like the little kind of sour kick. So I've just got some black rice vinegar there. A dash of that. And then kind of the solid toppings are the crushed peanuts, the spring onions, and the sesame seeds. So can everybody see that okay?
Well, that looks fantastic.
And then the other thing that we sometimes add is that big fan of pickles. So this, we like pickled mustard greens, which you can get in most Asian Chinese supermarkets now. The stuff that's in the brine, the sweet stuff is more to Burmese tastes rather than the Sichuan stuff, which is like the dry, salty stuff. So the ones that you can get in packets is the mustard green that we use. Also very similar to this Japanese stuff, which is called takana. So this is the Yutaka brand, but the takana is basically the exact same in mustard green that we eat in Burma. So this is often always like people will get that and will just chuck it in everything, but it's also very popular to eat in this. So I'm going to put a little bit in that as well. So. Oh, you know what? I did forget one thing, and that is chili oil, because we like chili oil. So this is just, I've just made some chili oil myself. There's a recipe in my book, but you can use any commercial chili oil. Everyone likes lao gama, so that's kind of something that you can use.
So there's garlic oil, sesame oil, chili oil, and there's sijek.
Sijek, the cooked oil, yeah. But only like a smidge of each. You're talking about like just over, maybe like a tablespoon of each, or maybe just under. So right, okay, that is finally the finished dish.
Look at that. Making us all hungry. And the sijek, is that made from vegetable or groundnut oil, as you mentioned earlier?
Generally ground up.
Groundnut.
That's our favourite oil.
Fantastic.
So yeah, so basically, I don't know if this is true or not. I have friends who have peanut allergies who say that they actually can eat groundnut oil. I think they said it's been processed in a way that it doesn't affect them in the same way that actual peanuts do. Because that is the one thing you do need to worry about, is if you do visit Burma, we do put peanuts in a lot of things. So you might have to basically carry a card, get someone helpful to translate for you. You know, like the tour company that you go with, they should be able to let people know that you can't eat peanuts, because peanuts are basically everywhere. So yeah, that is one thing to watch out for.
Yeah, you've got to be really careful, haven't you? Well, that looks absolutely amazing. So shall we move on to slicing and setting up the tofu?
Yes. So I'm going to show you how to make the salad first and then the fritters. Let me get rid of this, just because I'm worried I'll knock it over.
Fantastic.
So there's a couple of ways that you can slice it for the salad. So I'll do that first. The thing about the salad is that there's two main schools of thought on how to dress your salad. Now, in my book, I've kind of briefly alluded to one, but I've mainly talked about the way that I use. And again, it's the Upper Burma, Lower Burma divide. That's the thing that I always find quite interesting. One of the reasons that I wanted to write my book is because the books that are out there in the world already tend to focus more on Lower Burma, unsurprisingly, because, you know, Yangon, Rangoon, former capital city, most of the diaspora tend to come from Lower Burma. So that's of the restaurants that you have in America, the restaurants you have here. Although Le Pet, so I don't know if you know Mandalay on Edgware Road. Sorry, it was on Edgware Road, it's now on Kilburn High Street. So that is the Burmese restaurant that has been around since the 90s. Now, their family are from Lower Burma, so the food they cook is all very Lower Burma oriented. But Le Pet, which is the Burmese restaurant, which is in Shoreditch, which opened a couple of years ago now, their cook actually comes from the same town as my mom. So the stuff that's on his menu is actually very similar to stuff that I make. So yeah, if you want to get an idea of different types of food, you can go to both those restaurants and you will get quite a different feel for the cuisine, because they don't tend to overlap the stuff they have on their menus. So tofu salad, I'll show you how to do that first. Now, the way that the salad is chopped up, or the way that the tofu is chopped up, I think I've described it in my book as you chop it up like French fries, because the idea is that you want it to be not too thin, not too fat, but in sticks. The Burmese term is chow. So I've got the two slabs that I showed you earlier. So I'm going to do one slab I'm going to cut up for the tofu, and one slab I'm going to, for the fritters, and one slab I'm going to cut up for the salad. So I'm going to do the one for the salad first. Now, as I said, French fries. So I'm just doing each one probably about, I don't know, a couple of centimeters down. So I'll show you in each stage. So that's kind of the thickness, if you can see that. So it's that one, and then I'm going to cut it again so you'll see what the final shape looks like. So the only problem about using takeaway containers is that you do have this strange indentation. So if you do want to use proper Tupperware, you get a much prettier looking tofu. I don't even want to mention how often I've got delivery during lockdown. So. I recycle all my pots, so that's okay. My excuses today. I have 2 small children. So. I just realised these really look like poker chips, which isn't really one of the things that I found that when I was writing recipe directions is that I'm not very good. I don't have a professional training, so for a start, I don't have any knife skills. But the other thing is I don't really know how to describe things correctly. So I know there are terms like julienne and brunoise and all that kind of thing, and I don't feel I can use it with a straight face, because I just feel like that would be me kind of pretending to know stuff that I don't know. And so I would start using kind of real life examples and then realize, would people understand what I was talking about? So with the tofu, like I said, I say kind of you can cut it into French fry size. For another recipe, I said something like roll it into fat cigars. So it's all kind of, I'm trying to use examples that will appeal to people without them thinking I'm insane. So there you go.
I like that. It's really relatable.
Yeah, relatable. Actually, for my first book, I remember I was talking about something and I said, put it so that it's the same size as a ping pong ball. And the editor corrected it to table tennis ball. And I had a fight with her in a win. I would never say table tennis ball. I like ping pong. Can we say ping pong? And the publisher gave it in the end. But I just kind of thought, you know, ping pong. I want a bit of alliteration. There is a lost poet inside of me. So there you go. I just realised that I've done this so that it's not remotely French fry size. I'm going to blame performance pressure. In the end, basically, you want it to be in some kind of stick form. So it would normally be thinner than that. But yeah, we're talking about. Woo! And can you see the consistency now?
It would cut quite cleanly then, I'm thinking. You're not meeting much resistance there. It's just...
No, so if it's the right consistency, it should be nice, easy, slice through. But yeah, it's there you go. So I'm going to make a small bowl of the tofu. So as I said, going back to, I digress so badly. Going back to what I was saying about two schools of thought. So the Upper Burma style of making tofu, that's what I'm going to show you right now. So what you do is you get your tofu, you kind of try to make it so, kind of looks like Kaplunk. I don't know if that's what I meant. You know that game when you've got all the sticks coming out and you have to pull one out and the whole thing falls apart and then it means you've lost.
So this is the Tohu Thoke, is that correct? My pronunciation is
Tohu Thoke.
Sorry?
Tohu Thoke.
Right.
Thoke means salad.
I'm going to put that in the chat as well. I'm just reading.
So there you go. I've kind of arranged it in the bowl. So that's what it would look like in your bowl, the tofu, when you're ready to dress it. And now I'm going to dress it. So it has similar flavors to the molten tofu. It's not exactly the same. So this time I'm going to use two types of soy sauce, so light sauce and dark sauce. I really like this brand. I sort of turned into a massive ad, but the thing is, I'm really picky about the brands that I use, and Pearl River Bridge is my favorite.
That's quite widely available, isn't it?
It's really widely available. That's the other thing. I'm not going to recommend stuff that's hard to find. Although actually, the fish sauce I like is quite hard to find, but I'm not using any fish sauce today. That's okay.
Everything's hard to find where I am in Wiltshire.
Yeah, exactly. So we're talking about a tablespoon of the light soy, about a tablespoon of the dark soy, about a tablespoon of that cooked oil again. So it's this stuff again. Woo! About a tablespoon of the vinegar again. And then this time we've got some slightly more interesting ingredients. So I've got about a tablespoon of crushed garlic there. So that goes in. And then, I don't know if you're familiar with this stuff. It's sometimes called yellow soybean sauce. It's sometimes called salted soybean sauce. Can't remember the Chinese name. Begins with a T, but I'll find out and I'll message you. But basically, this stuff is really, it's kind of more savory than salty. So it's a really, really nice, kind of gives a nice kick to a lot of dishes. I use it in quite a lot of Burmese dishes. But it's not as sweet as, it's not as salty as, you know, the black bean sauce. So it's kind of a cousin of that. Right. But basically this just gives like a sweet, salty, savory kick to the whole thing. And then we've got the crushed peanuts again.
Are they roasted peanuts? Sort of roasted, yes. Salted?
Those are salted roasted peanuts. Mm-hmm. And this time we have a little bit, like about a tablespoon of crispy fried onions. And then lastly, coriander.
And that's
so basically when this arrives, it will look like that, but you need to dress it before you eat it. But that is your finished tofu salad, or Upper Burma style tofu salad. So just a reminder, you have got the tofu itself, and then it was dressed with both light soy sauce and dark soy sauce, a little bit of the cooked oil, some vinegar, some salted soybean sauce, some crushed fresh garlic, crushed peanuts, coriander, and what was the last thing? Oh, crispy fried onions.
Nice. And do you make the onions, or would you buy?
Either. I tend to make my own, but you can also get some really nice commercial stuff. And sometimes it's got wheat flour in it, which is not great. But there's some places that do gluten-free versions of crispy fried onions, which are really great. But in the end, you can just use the stuff that you can buy in tubs for hot dogs. You know, it's much of a muchness. So long as you've got that crunch and that onion flavour, I'm not going to be too precious about it.
Amazing. And how much of the yellow bean was on there? Sorry.
Probably again about a tablespoon.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. And we'll look up the brand at the end.
Yes. So, like I said, that is kind of the upper Burma style. Now, the lower Burma style is, instead of using, it's pretty much the same, but they don't use the peanuts. Instead of coriander, they will use lime leaf. So fresh lime leaves that have been snipped into little ribbons. And then instead of vinegar, they use tamarind. So, but apart from that, it's pretty much the same dish. It's just, like I said, regional favorites, regional kind of likes and dislikes. So that's, like I said, upper Burma style tofu salad. We've done the noodles. So we need to make the fritters.
How exciting.
Okay, hang on. I need to get some oil on them.
Hey.
So I have this. I do have a proper wok, but I was worried that I was going to knock it over because it's got a massive handle. So I've got this thing instead just for this. So this is, I think this is like a Tefal thing. I think they call it, it's meant to be like an Indian pan, but it works just as well as a wok. So again, I've got groundnut oil, but you can also use any kind of vegetable oil. Rapeseed's pretty good, actually. And then I add probably about 5 centimeters worth of oil. Now I've experimented a bit with this just because I know people aren't necessarily that keen on deep frying for obvious reasons. But the problem is that this tofu, when you fry it, because it's relatively fragile, so it's kind of robust to making a salad. But when you fry it, if you don't use enough oil, it does do that thing where it just kind of goes bleh. So I've tried it in an air fryer, that didn't work, and I've tried to shallow fry it, and again, that doesn't work unless you make it very stodgy. Because I know some people have adapted it so that they can do it in a shallow fry, but the problem with that is it's basically, what you're doing is you're basically turning it into fried tofu to use in a curry, which is fine. You still have like this crisp coating on it, but it's not what I would say or what anyone else would say if you were talking about tofu fritters, which is what I'm trying to make for you here. Oh, and that's the other thing about this stuff. So the way we would normally eat is, so we've got the salad, we've got the molten stuff. Like I said, I'm about to fry it for you. When it's been fried, you can eat the fritters as is, just as a snack. They're also used a lot on as like a topping for lots of various noodle dishes. And it's also can be used to cook with. So the way it is right now, on the unfried version, you can use basically the same way you would use bean curd. But when it's been fried, again, it's a bit more robust, and you can turn that into a salad, or you can turn that into a curry, or whatever. So you can just experiment with the tofu and use it the way you would use bean curd, but it's not going to have the same properties that it would have if you're using it as like normal fritters. So this is just on high, like the highest heat you can get it. And then I'll show you how you should cut this for frying. So one style of cutting it is actually the same style as this. So I'm just going to leave these and fry some of these. So you can have these as kind of like, I guess they do look like polenta chips. So you can have them as polenta chips. And I think some trendy places in Burma have started just serving them, in the whole kind of newspaper in a cup type thing. So you can get that in restaurants in Burma now. But the traditional way of cutting the tofu, there's two main ways. First way, you turn them into little triangles, to the extent that I've seen them on some menus outside of Burma, where it will be described as golden triangles, which I think is a terrible name for obvious reasons, because it has all sorts of bad connotations. But they're golden triangles. So you have them as golden triangles, or you can have them in a way that they like in the Shan state, so the original form of this tofu, called nabianjo. And nabianjo means double fried. And that's actually the way I like it best, because the thing about the normal frying, so if you fry it only the once, you literally need to eat it straight away, because if you don't, it immediately goes soggy. So, it's quite good as a crowd pleaser. So if you're about to dish up a meal, then if you're doing these fritters at the very last minute, as soon as they're ready, you kind of get them out with your skimmer, and then you garnish them, you put them on top of your noodles or whatever, and that's great. But if you want to keep them a little bit, so if you want to put them out as snacks or whatever, you can double fry it. And the best thing about double frying is that You can also kind of, there can be steps between the stages, so you can wait. So a bit like if you're making triple cooked chips, you can do one stage and then not do the next stage until a little bit later. And it just means that it's just that much crisper. You can't do it more than twice though, because if you do it more than twice, what happens is the fluffiness, which is also incredibly important, just disappears, and you end up with just like a crisp brick. So you want to avoid that too. So that is getting hot.
So that would be sort of like 180 or something like that.
Yeah, 180, 190. Because the thing about making the tofu is that you kind of need to hold your nerve. You have to start off with it quite hot, because if you don't start off with it hot, what happens is the tofu, it needs to form an immediate crisp shell. And if it's not hot enough, it won't form that shell, and it will start breaking up again. So this is what I mean about it's easy, but you need to watch for things, if you see what I mean. So.
And I'm sure it helps by keeping it stored in the kitchen paper, so you haven't got that sort of damp.
Yes, exactly. So you're getting rid of all the kind of there's no moisture basically. So I've cut it for the chip style, and then I'm gonna just do the other styles while this thing's heating, and then I'll show you what it looks like. The other thing about making tofu is that if you want to be completely certain that the fritters aren't going to fall apart, is you have to be careful of untidy edges. So, you know, because I kind of dolloped this into a takeaway toner, it's got like little bits on it, like raggedy little bits. So if you slice those away, and then you can just eat those, turn them into a salad. But it just means that if the stuff that you're frying, if you have it as kind of geometrically neat as possible, you're more likely to get a better shell on the tofu. So yeah, it's sort of maths, but not really. It's the same with a lot of the Burmese fritters, actually. So when you make them, if you have like the amount of batter is done in a certain way, that means that it immediately kind of forms and curls round. So like there's a lentil fritter, the same kind of thing, where you have to be very careful and keep folding in the edges, because otherwise it will just dissipate across the hot oil, which is something you want to avoid. Okay, so I'm just gonna cook these. Stand up to this. These aren't the prettiest ones I've ever made either, but only me that has to eat them. I'm cutting these, I'm doing these into the triangle shapes, because the square shape is actually, it's just a square, it's not very interesting. But the triangles are quite fun.
Fantastic. What sort of knife would one use typically? Is there a, you know, you're using just a chef's knife there, aren't you?
Yeah, just like a wide kitchen knife. I mean, you don't want to use a small one, because the problem is that although the tofu is relatively firm, if you use a small knife, it can catch and then rip the tofu.
And what would typically be used in a traditional Burmese kitchen? So
we use choppers, which kind of look like Chinese cleavers. So they look very similar, but they're not quite the same. And that's the traditional Burmese knife is like a chopper, basically, and that's used for everything. So if you're chopping vegetables, if you're chopping tofu, it's because it's got a nice wide fat blade like a Chinese cleaver. Okay, so go on, and what I do, I will prepare basically a colander and a little plate underneath it, because when you've done a first fry, at the very least, you chuck it in here, and then any of that residual oil will drain. And it also means if you're going to do the double fry, which I may well do, you then just toss it all back in, all in one go. And then when you're about to serve up, then you would put it back on kitchen paper, just to make sure you've mopped up any grease. Yes, we don't. It's the Burmese joke that we don't tend to use colanders to drain water. We tend to use it to drain oil, because we're always frying things. Okay. Hopefully this is hot enough. I'm just going to test one. Can you hear the sizzle?
Mm.
I think that's just about. I'll let this one come out. I'll fish it out and then I'll put the rest in. But that's just about the right heat. If it's any cooler than that, like I said, what will happen is that the tofu will go in and then it will break up, which is not what you want.
Yeah.
It'll still be delicious, but you don't get like the nice shapes.
Mm. Hear it sizzling away.
Okay, I'm just gonna get this fish done out and show you what it looks like. I don't know if you can see, but that's kind of crisp already. Can you hear that?
Yeah, that's pretty quick, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's about right. And then I don't know if you can see that, but can you hear that crisp? So it's fluffy inside, but it's got that crisp shell on the outside. And that is basically heaven. And so, I mean, it's like I said, it's served like this, straight off the wok. You would just chuck it in your mouth and burn your mouth and be happy with a burnt mouth. Or you can do the nabianjo thing, which is the twice fried thing, which I'm probably going to do here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a few in here, and then there's going to be some crackling for a while. Sorry. Okay, so you got your classic warnings with hot oil. Don't crowd the pan. So you saw the size that I'm doing. There'd probably be about 6 in there, no more than that, because otherwise it's just going to turn into chaos. And then because it is being deep fried, generally you can kind of move them back and forth with the skimmer a little bit, but you shouldn't have to flip them necessarily, because it should be hot enough that it's forming that kind of crispy golden shell around the whole thing. And it shouldn't take long, probably about 2 minutes, if that.
Making us all hungry.
Yeah, I wish you could smell this.
I bet it's good. Does it spit much?
Sorry?
Does the oil spit when you put the...
No, it shouldn't do, but that's also why I said you shouldn't put too many in there. The reason I was spitting earlier is because I think I just washed this skimmer and I hadn't quite dried it well enough, so I think there's a little bit of oil on the skimmer. Yeah. Ordinarily, you wouldn't be doing anything quite that dangerous. I'm just frying things now.
Fantastic.
Talk about yourselves. I'm just going to fry things.
Well, I'm just being really hungry.
So the way this is eaten, like I said, you either use it for a garnish. So we sometimes we eat it with our national dish, which is called moreish, which is like a fish noodle soup. So that'll be like one of the crunchy things on the side. We also eat on the side of there's a dish called Tohu Thoke, which is a chicken noodle salad. And we also eat it by itself, just as a snack with a cup of green tea. If you're having it as a snack, you would have it with a dipping sauce, so either like a chili sauce or like a tamarind sauce, something sour and spicy, because this is it's relatively mild. It's delicious, but it's relatively mild. So you need something to kind of break through and enable you to eat as many as you can as well. So you want that spicy sour kick.
That sounds delicious. Wonderful.
So
really, it's just a couple of minutes, isn't it?
Yeah, not very long at all. And then, can you see those?
You can hear the sort of rustle of them.
Yes, I've just dropped one onto my laptop. I'm sure that's fine. But yes, they're incredibly crispy, like the nicest crunch. But the inside is like fluffy and soft and delicious. So like I said, this has only been fried once. So you can serve these straight away, either as a garnish for a dish or as a snack. Or you can let these sit, and then when you let them sit, obviously they will go soft, so the kind of crispy shell will disappear. But you can then fry them again, and then that's the way the Shan people eat it, which is in a bianjo. And then if you do that, then you're definitely going to have that nice crispy coating, but you still maintain that fluffy, kind of soft interior. So what I will do is I will probably actually refry these, just so you can see how golden they go. So if you're refrying them, you don't have to worry about crowding the pan anymore, because one of the reasons you don't want to crowd the pan initially is partly because you don't want to kind of, set fire to yourself or like get the oils missing, but partly because you need to give the tofu a chance to form that shell. Because if you put too many in the pan initially, there's a risk that they'll stick together, and so they don't have that opportunity to form that kind of protective crispiness. So now that they're all crispy already, you can just chuck as many as you like in, so long as you don't overflow the pan. So I'm going to put all of those back into the hot oil.
Right. I wish that were my lunch.
That's the thing. And I was saying about how much we like fritters. So like, there's a whole chapter in my book on fried things. And the thing about that chapter is that I've had lots of people who have my book who said to me they've been too scared to make anything from that chapter because they're too scared to make things with deep fry. And all I said was, if you can get over your phobia, do, because you are missing out on such a huge part of Burmese cuisine. Just turn the pan off.
Isn't it? I've had a lot of comments from people about the same thing.
Sorry, I can't hear you over the sizzling oil.
No, I've had a lot of comments from people about being really, really scared to fry at home. And
yes.
It's actually quite safe. It's not as sort of wasteful and costly as people perceive it to be, and you can even get your oil recycled as well. So it's it's definitely worth doing, isn't it?
It is so worth doing. I mean, you can do these in a deep fryer if you like as well. When I've done this at supper clubs, I've actually used them. There's like mini deep fat fries you can get. But I haven't made them myself. I usually get whoever's helping me to do it because I don't like machines. I already told you. I'm the worst Luddite. So there you go. So I don't know if you can see, but from the second fry, it's much more golden looking. So there you go. Woo!
Wow.
It's very strange because I'd love you to taste it, but it feels like I'm taunting you all. Here's a really crisp tofu fritter. So hang on, I'm just going to do the crunch.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you can see the steam coming out of that as well.
Delicious.
Oh, so anyway.
Through the screen.
So yeah, like I said, I don't really use real tofu. I know that's terrible. I shouldn't call it real tofu, but I don't tend to use bean curd just because tofu to me has always meant this stuff. So like a lovely golden yellow thing, which is delicious in its own right, and you can do all sorts of different things with it. So yeah, that's Burmese tofu basically. I'm not holding these fritters going, what should I do with it? I kind of want to stick it in my mouth, but I don't want to look uncouth, so I'm just going to put it to one side.
Well, MiMi, honestly, you deserve a hot fritter after that. Thank you so much for sharing your recipes with us, and I think it's just been absolutely fascinating. And the food looks so delicious. We've actually had a few questions on the chat that I haven't read out, and I'm sure people have got their own questions to ask you. And Sam Bilton has a competition as well for us.
Okay, great.
For us all. So should we start with the questions first of all, or would you like a minute to have a hot fritter and Sam could maybe talk about
just mopping my brow. I've been deep frying. Everything's too warm. Yes, no, I'm really happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. So there are a few questions about the sort of taste of tofu that some of you asked. Would you like to ask MiMi now, perhaps? I think
what it tastes like.
There was one from Jenny about the flavour, wasn't there?
Yeah, I was just interested. Thank you for a lovely appetizing insight. I didn't know about Burmese tofu. What does it taste like compared to Chinese tofu, which is what I know?
Even if you don't put in the seasoning, so like I said, I tend to put MSG or stock in, but even if you don't, it has a flavor that is, it's chickpeas. It's quite distinctive. You would always put salt in, so it's basically got the chickpea flavor, but because it's been kind of fried in that way, it's more of a kind of nutty flavor. So it's not like your normal. And what we tend to use is we use kala chana. So the smaller, darker chickpeas is what we use in Burma. Right. And I think gram flour is also made from kala chana. So it's not like your standard canned chickpea flavor. It's a more roasted flavor. So it's basically a kind of a slightly savory, roasted, nutty flavor. So.
Lovely. I will definitely be trying it. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds so delicious. We had a couple of questions about the black rice vinegar.
Yes.
Which one were you using, please?
You know what? I have no idea. I think I got this one from Sous Chef. I don't think it's even got a name. I literally bought it because I liked the design. In Burma, we tend to use a black rice, like a rice vinegar that's very malty. So actually, malt vinegar is just as easy to use. So even sarsens is quite a good thing. I wouldn't use plain rice vinegar because I think that's too light. Same as cider vinegar. I think those are a little bit too kind of, they don't have the depth. So you want something that's got depth. So either a black rice vinegar or a malt vinegar is the best one to use.
Well, that's really good to know. Sam Bilton has also put a link to that vinegar in the chat. And coincidentally, we have an offer, a discount code from Sous Chef as well.
Yes.
Sam has put it on there.
I love Sous Chef.
Great.
Actually, you know the pickle that I was showing you that we absolutely adore? I actually get this from Sous Chef.
Do you?
Yeah, that stuff. It's so good. I'm obsessed.
I think they sell that brand in Waitrose as well. I think I've seen.
They do. I'm not sure if they have this particular pickle. They have like the ones that are made from radish as well, which is also delicious. But it's the mustard greens that I'm particularly fond of. So
fantastic. We also had a question about where to buy MSG from.
Sous Chef.
Well,
we get 10% off, not a problem. You get quite a big bag for just over £2, I think. Although they do use the delightful euphemism of umami powder, I think, so as not to offend people's sensibilities. So.
Absolutely, yeah, that's good to know. Does anyone have any other questions? There may. Oh, Laura's straight in there.
I've unmuted myself. I had two actually. So. You know the oil that you use to fry the tofu in?
Yes.
Can that be used as your reuse oil that you talked about earlier?
Yes.
Or is that... Okay.
That's exactly what it is. So because we're frying all the time, I don't know, it's probably like an evolutionary thing because we're constantly frying. I think someone went, hang on, we should do something with this oil. And the thing is, because normally it's stuff that you've done fritters in or onions or garlic, it's got that, that toastiness, that nuttiness that means that you want to do something with this. And so, yeah, we use it to dress all sorts of things. So we use it to dress noodles, we use it to dress dal, we use it to dress rice dishes. It's basically something that, there is a saying that I mentioned in my book, which said that a Burmese person says that if you have oil, you could even eat straw, because we really like oil. But cooked oil is like our favorite type of oil because it has that extra dimension that you don't have when it's straight out of a bottle.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And the other question was, you mentioned a dipping sauce for the tofu that you just eat it when it's a snack. That was tamarind and
chili.
Yes. Oh, tamarind and chili.
Yes, tamarind and chili.
How do you do that?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll message Charlotte afterwards. But basically, it's to taste really, but it's an amount of tamarind paste. Not the sugary stuff if you can avoid it. From Asian supermarkets, particularly Vietnamese ones, you can get either the stuff that comes in a jar, which is basically just watered down tamarind, or you can get the blocks, which you again just kind of add a bit of boiling water, and then you have to actually take the tamarind seeds out. But basically, proper tamarind paste as opposed to the stuff you get in jars, which is sweetened artificially. And that mixed with kind of equal quantities of a little bit of garlic, a little bit of lemon juice, and a little bit of chili oil, but basically to taste, because you want something that's going to give you a bit of a kick. And then the chili oil I tend to use is like the one that I make myself, which is in my book, but also you can get like commercially available ones. I was going to say, actually, I don't know if any of you know Pippi Eats. She's probably on Instagram is probably where she's kind of most well known. But her website, so what she's been doing recently, which is absolutely wonderful, is she's been trying to promote other creators. And so she's just got a book out herself, but she's been selling other people's books on her website and also other people's products. And she has this huge section, which is just chili oils and chili crisps. And on that section, she actually, one of the things she has is a chili oil, a Burmese chili oil that's made by a friend of mine. So she started to sell all sorts of amazing chili crisps and chili oils. So any of those would be absolutely wonderful. So a bit of that mixed with some tamarind paste and a little bit of, like I said, lime juice and a little bit of water to thin it out, because our sauces tend to be relatively runny as opposed to kind of ketchup-y type ones.
Fantastic. Does anyone have any more questions? Sam Gates, hi.
I had a question. Thank you so much for that, by the way. It was brilliant. I'm definitely going to have a go at it. I think it sounds completely gorgeous. I had a question which is just about Burmese food and not about tofu. My mum has a friend who's Burmese, who's just given me a bag of dried hibiscus and has said that they use it to cook with. I'm not quite sure which part of Burma he's from, but I've never cooked with it before. I've seen it as tea before, but I've never seen it in any recipes. And I wondered if it was something you're familiar with and if there's anything you might suggest.
So hibiscus is probably used more regionally. What I would say is that the most popular vegetable in Burma is something called roselle, which is from the hibiscus family. Right. Now roselle, I think in this country tends to be sold either as roselle in Jamaican shops, or in Indian shops it's sold as something called gongura, and it's the same family, so it's not quite the same thing. Although I actually have I've got a bag of it myself, of this hibiscus, and the reason I've got a bag of it myself is because it basically tastes the same, because it's the same family. Right. Sorrel is also from the same family, I believe, and I think in my book I suggest that as a substitute. So what it is it's a kind of a very sour, very sweet vegetable. I guess it's a salad, I suppose. It's a flower. Hibiscus is a flower, but the roselle is more of a leaf. And what we do with that is that we cook it up with bamboo shoots, and it's like the most popular vegetable dish in Burma. So I don't know how hibiscus itself is used in terms of as is, but I know it's used as a popular substitute for roselle. So you could use it instead of roselle in the roselle and bamboo shoot stir fry.
Thank you, that's great, thank you.
Fantastic. Sam Bilton, shall we? Somewhere.
Yes, I am.
Hi. Shall we talk about Mandalay?
Yes, so as some of you will know, I coordinate the awards and I get sent all the entries. And as lovely as all these books are, sadly, I do not have room to keep them all. So I have got a copy of MiMi's book, Mandalay, which was shortlisted this year. And I also have a copy of another Burma cookbook by Stephen and Bridget Anderson, Burma, Food, Family and Conflict. And that was also shortlisted, I think a different category. And MiMi has kindly sent this wonderful book plate. I don't know whether you can, sorry, let me turn this glaring light on so you can see better, hopefully. This wonderful book plate. Can you see that, everyone? So I'm not going to stick it in. I'll let you guys do that yourselves, whoever wins. I think I'm going to do two prizes because, well, it just seems fair. There's quite a lot of you here today. So I've got a nice little bowl here.
Very high tech. I love it.
And I shall pull a name out of said bowl, first name for MiMi's book. If you've already got it though, could I just say, could you say, and that's Julia. Julia, Are you there? Well done. If you have got it, let me know, and I'll put another name out. And for
Thank you. No, I don't have it. I'm very excited.
Excellent.
Yay. Congratulations.
Julia,
Thank you.
sorry, this one is, oh, Kevin, but Kevin's left, hasn't he? Well, anyway, but I don't. He did sit through. He was in the presentation, so I will. So Kevin has given. But if you can message, I'll put my email address in the chat. Julia, if you can message me with your address, and I'll get that in the post as soon as possible. So thank you everyone for coming. MiMi, that was absolutely fabulous. I have to confess, I'm not a fan of tofu. I haven't been a fan of tofu.
It's not the same as normal tofu, I told you.
I am definitely going to give, that's why I disappeared. I was just taking a picture of that page in your book. Absolutely amazing. They look amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. It was great.
Brilliant.
Good to see you all.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, and we really appreciate it. And it will be on YouTube soon, so we can share with anyone who hasn't been able to join. MiMi, thanks a million.
Thank you
very
Charlotte.
much.
Thank you, everybody. It's really lovely to see you all.
Thank you. Can you put what was in the chat in an email, because I can't figure out how to save it on my iPad.
I'll try and do that for you now. I might have to just copy and paste it, if that's okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Jeff. Let me just see if I can grab that now before we end.
And the last bit I had to disappear. Well, I was still listening, but was putting my cinnamon rolls in the
Cinnamon
oven.
rolls.
Oh, well, she's making me hungry, you see. It's very different.
I'll forgive you.
I'll have to have a go at the fried tofu. Looks very nice, actually. The challenge is going to be making it the first time and not making a complete mess of it.
It's all right. Like I said, if it becomes a hash, you can make the porridge version instead.
Will do. Okay. Thank you very
I'll send
much.
you that, Jeff, by email.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. MiMi, that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant. I've learned so much. I've got 4 pages of A4 notes.
Oh, wow.
Scribbling down here, so I'll really look forward to having a go. The link will go up in, let me just stop the recording.